Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Dialogue. I'm Taimur Shamil. Pakistan is navigating through its foreign policy in an environment which is rapidly changing. The regional dynamics have been changing recently. In Afghanistan, we see that Taliban and United States have struck a deal and they are moving on with that. But at the same time, we see violence in Afghanistan, and we also see that politically Afghanistan is still not stable. The political entities, the political leadership in Afghanistan, they are not on the same page. The violence continues. Daesh is an emerging threat in Afghanistan. And when it comes to Pakistan-Afghanistan relations, managing the border is very important. For Pakistan, a peaceful Afghanistan, which is at peace with itself and with its neighbors, is very important. While talking about Pakistan's foreign policy, we see on the western border, Afghanistan, and I just told you about the situation over there. On the eastern side, we see aggression from the Indian side, Indian aggression in Indian-occupied Kashmir, on the line of control for that matter, and on working boundary. Though Pakistan wants peace in the region, but what do you do with the neighbor which is aggressive most of the times, keeping the LOC, as I just mentioned, hot? What are the options for Pakistan in terms of foreign policy to cope up with these two challenges? When we talk about Iran, Pakistan's relations with Iran are stable, but at the same time, the border management is also a little bit of an issue over there in Iran. Recently, there was a phone call between Chief of Army Staff General Bajwa and General Bakri of Iran, and both agreed that some of the spoilers in the region need to be taken care of, and Pakistan and Iran would also be working on that. China is Pakistan's all-weather friends, and there is a big opportunity for both countries, China as well as for Pakistan. Both are working on China-Pakistan economic corridor. Economy is a big potential for Pakistan and China. So while looking at all these potential and these challenges, how is Pakistan navigating through these challenges, navigating for its foreign policy? We're discussing about this with our special guests in the studios and also on Skype. We are joined by Lieutenant General Raza Muhammad Khan on Skype, renowned senior defense analyst and former president of National Defense University. I'll start with General Raza. General Raza, you heard the introduction talking about Pakistan's foreign policy. There are challenges and there are opportunities as well. Let's start with Afghanistan first. The political situation over there and the security situation. Daesh is an emerging threat. How do we address our foreign policy goals, and how do we achieve them with the means that we have at the moment? This challenge of ISIS and the political, I would call, instability in Afghanistan, how is Pakistan looking at it?
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, I'd like to give you an overview of our foreign policy in the region and globally, as you made references to some of them. Remember that the main objectives of Pakistan's foreign policies are to protect, promote the national interests of Pakistan, to maintain good relations with all countries, particularly our neighbors and the Islamic countries. Now, all this has to be done within the obtaining milieu or the environment, and we are all aware of the environment that have been created because of the situation of the COVID-19, the effect that COVID-19 is having on the economies of all the countries of the world and the countries of the region in particular. You made a mention of Pakistan's, relations with Afghanistan, Iran, and with India in particular. With that, I'd like to add, Pakistan's relations with China, with the oil-producing countries, with the Middle East, Malaysia, and the UAE. But coming back to your questions about the situation in Afghanistan, I think yesterday the U.S. Foreign Secretary very categorically stated that most of the very vicious attacks that were conducted in Afghanistan in the last few days were done by the Daesh. And he also warned and asked all the Afghans, which includes By the way, the Afghan government and I would say also the Taliban and all the warring factions to unite against this common threat. And I think that was a very valid observation. Pakistan has always been saying that Daesh is a threat to the security of the entire region, in particular to the security of
Right.
Afghanistan
Right.
and
General
also
Wazir,
Pakistan.
You're right, absolutely. And one more point while talking about Daesh, there is a specific lobby in Afghanistan which fans anti-Pakistan sentiment, which is a very small lobby, I would say. Pakistan recently has been investing a lot in the people of Afghanistan, with the people of Afghanistan. There have been 3,000 scholarships given to the Afghan students. We have been opening hospital there in Afghanistan, also on the border. How do you see the diplomacy, people to people contact of Pakistan and Afghanistan in terms of Pakistan's foreign policy?
Look, I would look at it in a different way. When we are talking of people to people contact, then I think a large chunk of the Afghan population, which is over 2.5 million registered Afghans, they are here in Pakistan and they are already in contact with us. At the
Right.
same time, there are thousands of people who cross into Pakistan and Afghanistan and vice versa through the Chaman and the Torkham border. So that contact is already there. Unfortunately, for some reasons known to all of us, some elements of the present government of Afghanistan in order to absolve themselves sometimes of the security incidents there in Afghanistan or other matters where better governance is required. It is easier for them to put the blames on Pakistan. And we also are aware that at times some of the security agencies, the foreign security agencies, they are cooperating with the Afghan security agencies, particularly the NDS,
Right.
which is actually detrimental to the security of Pakistan and which brings in distances not only between the governments of Afghanistan and Pakistan, but also the people of these two countries, and which is very detrimental to the peace process.
Right.
And
Right.
I hope that this is understood by the government of Afghanistan, and I'm
Government.
sure it is understood by the United States, China, and other stakeholders in the region.
Right. We have Ambassador Zamir Akram with us on phone call, renowned senior ambassador, expert on Pakistan's foreign policy. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Welcome to the show. Ambassador Akram, talking about Pakistan's foreign policy, I talked about the challenges and opportunities for Pakistan in the region. Uh, let's start with Afghanistan. The situation over there, Taliban and the US have struck a deal. What are the challenges and opportunities for Pakistan in Afghanistan and specifically on the western border?
Well, I was hopeful that when the Americans and the Taliban had reached an agreement at the beginning of the year, that this would lead to a meaningful peace process and the return of some measure of peace and stability in Afghanistan. But there were challenges then, and now we see after some months that those opportunities that have been presented by the result of this agreement have not been taken up, especially by the government of Afghanistan, because they did not honor initially their commitment for release of prisoners on both sides, and then used other different means for delaying implementation of the requirement for an Afghan dialogue. And so I think that at the moment the situation has become worse than it was in the beginning of the year. And I would blame the Afghan government because they also launched military operations. And so I think that at the moment the situation in Afghanistan has gone from bad to worse with the presence of this Daesh. Now we know that Americans have acknowledged that Daesh is responsible for the attack on the maternity hospital, for the attack on the funeral. And
Right.
so this is complicating matters even further. So, and then the Afghan government has not ceased their military operations. The Taliban have also responded by their military operations. So, the peace process, I think, has just been derailed, and it would be very difficult. We had Mr. Khalilzad in Pakistan and in the region to try and bring the process back on track. But so far he has not succeeded. I think what is needed is really more American pressure. The Americans have threatened to cut off aid. They've also asked the Afghan leadership to get their act together, but so far the Afghans have not done much. And it is also, I would say, last point that the visit by Khalilzad to India was very telling in my view, because I think what he told the Indians was not to create more confusion and not to create conditions which would place a hurdle in the
Right.
implementation of the accord. So I think India is also playing a negative role, which we know, because they want to keep the Afghan situation unstable. That causes a problem for Pakistan. For Pakistan, a stable, peaceful Afghanistan is of extreme interest. It's in our strategic interest, and therefore we continue to push for an inter-Afghan dialogue that can end this conflict and hopefully bring peace to that country and to our borders.
Right. And Ambassador Akram, my last question to you, you just mentioned India and also India's role, playing a spoiler's role in Afghanistan. Pakistan and India relations on the eastern border and specifically in Indian-occupied Kashmir. Should Pakistan expect any kind of mild, let's say, attitude from the Indian side, because Pakistan wants peace and stability in the region? We opened the Kartarpur corridor as well. While talking about Indian-occupied Kashmir and the aggression recently that we saw on the line of control, do you think that BJP government would be in a mood or in a situation to talk about peace in the region with Pakistan?
No. I think as long as Mr. Modi is in power, we should not have any hopes at all about any kind of dialogue, any kind of working relationship with India, or any kind of ways to resolve our problems. In fact, I am afraid that with this kind of fascist government that you have in India, with the kind of policies it is following in occupied Kashmir and against the Indian Muslims in general, especially now under the cover of this COVID pandemic, where they are discriminating against the Muslims of India and have intensified their repression in Kashmir, there is no room whatsoever. I think that Pakistan-India relations can be put on any kind of positive note, and I would say that as long as Mr. Modi is around, we should not entertain any expectation of any improvement or even of some kind of stabilization in our relations. In fact, the situation today is extremely dangerous in my view because of the violations of the line of control, the shelling, almost continuous shelling on our side of Kashmir, of Azad Kashmir. So we should keep our guard up. We should not let down our defenses. We should be prepared to respond to any kind of misadventure from the Indian side.
Right. Ambassador Zamir Akram, thank you for joining us.
Thank
you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
In the studios, we are joined by Mr. Muhammad Ali, a renowned expert on Pakistan's foreign policy and national security. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Ali, talking about Pakistan's foreign policy, and I think you are the best person to talk about the conceptualizing Pakistan's foreign policy, the challenges that are there, and the opportunities as well. We were talking about Afghanistan with Ambassador Zamir Akram and with General Raza. In Afghanistan, interestingly, we see that India was left out. Though recently, when Ambassador Khalilzad, he visited India, he interacted with Jaishankar, with their external ministry and people of the strategic community. They want to give India a role in Afghanistan, but is India in a position to play a role of, let's say, any positive role in Afghanistan or in the region? Because keeping in mind, India has always been into non-alignment not taking any sides, not making any alliances when it comes to actually putting boots on the ground? How do you see that?
Shamil, thank you so much. I think Afghanistan should be seen currently in terms of the current circumstances that Pakistan is confronted with right now in this geostrategic environment. There are 2-3 factors which your learned panelists have already pointed out. Couple of things. Number one, Mr. Trump has elections later this year. So I think he has the greatest loss to recover from by announcing a timely, peaceful withdrawal of the US military and declaring the end of this conflict, which was the costliest in the US history for a very long time. So I see the frustration in Washington with the lack of progress in the peace process. And I think our foreign policy should have 3 key approaches. Number one, it should boldly and consistently warn Washington that if the peace process destabilizes or derails because of any spoilers, that includes India, the loss will be borne by Washington as well. So by spoiling the peace process in Afghanistan, India is also indirectly harming the US interests. That is point number one. Point number two, India also wants, obviously, to become relevant in Central Asian politics and also Afghan security situation. I think a consequence of that is the rise of Daesh in that region. And I think it is very important for Islamabad to take the Afghani nation into confidence, not just the Kabul government, and also China, Russia, Turkey, and Iran, that Daesh is a major spoiler in this region, which has a natural convergence of interest with India. So India and Daesh are the gravest threats to the peace and stability of Afghanistan in particular and this region in general. Right. So we should attempt through diplomatic means to isolate India in this region because they have an unnatural presence in Kabul. Right. In terms of security, they have no role. In terms of economy, I think China has also a great stake because if Pakistan's western border becomes destabilized and there are problems which spill over into Balochistan, I think China will also see harm coming to its interests. So China should also put pressure on New Delhi that you need to back off. You have nothing to do with this region because if you want to maintain a peaceful relationship in this region, I think China and the US should convince India that its role in Afghanistan and Western Asia is harmful to the interests of both the US as well as China. Right. Insofar as Pakistan is concerned, Pakistan should dissuade Iran and Afghan Taliban and also China that India's role and attempt to isolate Pakistan in this region should also be denied. This is very important because there are some incidents which we have noticed recently in Balochistan in which Indian elements were using the Iranian territory. That is something we should very forcefully and boldly tell Tehrani friends, our Irani friends, that this is not going to help our relationship because India is playing the spoiler in this whole region and harming the interests of all the global as well as regional powers.
Right, very interesting. And General Raza, overall if we look at the world, we see more wars post 2010. We see more collective deaths in the world. There have been wars, there have been rise of terrorist organizations, and most of them we have seen in Afghanistan. Now, a peaceful Afghanistan, at peace with itself, would be at peace with its neighbors. India's spoiler role in Afghanistan can also spoil the prospects for United States, as Syed Muhammad Ali just mentioned, and for China, for Pakistan, and all the countries in the region. Do you think that US would take up this stance with India that they need to back off, as Syed Muhammad Ali said, and Do you think that the Afghan leaders, they realize this situation?
You see, here the Pakistan's foreign policy predicament is that the U.S. South Asia strategy has given a certain role to India, and that role is to contain China and to control Pakistan. So far, there hasn't been any change in that, and you are seeing the manifestation of this policy in a number of domains. Like there were these India-China sort of standoffs very recently and also in the past, and through that I think India is trying to send some signals to Washington that it is following that policies in some way to contain China, and as a quid pro quo, it is expecting that the United States will continue to favor it everywhere and sell it free arms. So the same is applicable here in Afghanistan as well. I think if they are supporting New Delhi in Afghanistan and giving it a certain role to come to the assistance of the erstwhile Northern Alliance, then I think that will be detrimental to the peace process in Afghanistan and also to the interests of the United States. And I think this should be understood by them, and they should dissuade themselves from doing that. Having said that, the issue of the threats in Afghanistan, the TPP threat is also there. Daesh now I think is of two kinds in Afghanistan. One is the ISIS or the Daesh Khorasan, which the United States is actually naming. And some of the Afghan officials are also naming another component of Daesh, which is slightly different from the Daesh Khorasan component, and that is the Middle Eastern or the Arabic Daesh. Some breakaway elements of the TPP probably are also with the Daesh, which are being supported openly and surreptitiously by India. So these are actually the multiple threats which are there, and I would go back to what the United States said, that all elements in Afghanistan, they should unite to quell this threat. And in that, I think it has been rightly pointed out again and again that the Indian government should be categorically told that any interference by them which dents the peace process there will not be acceptable, regardless of the US, India-US South Asia policy.
Right. Okay. Ali, talking about the security situation, as I just mentioned, security is a concern for all the nations. Before 2010, in Afghanistan, we have been experiencing it since 2001, even before that. But recently, there has been a rise in terrorist organizations, violence overall in the world, Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria for that matter. And Pakistan borders a country which has been at war with itself for the last 18, 19 years, and there is a superpower which has invaded Afghanistan. Security is a major concern for Pakistan. What is Pakistan's regional security approach, and how do we cooperate with regional countries to address our security concerns?
I think Pakistan's regional policy is very clear. It has three fundamental approaches or objectives. Number one, it desires security in the region by preventing any conventional or subconventional conflict through conventional as well as strategic deterrent. And then the second approach is to promote stability and in the region, and the third is to promote geo-economic cooperation with number of countries. So these three things are mutually reinforcing because they simultaneously allow us to pursue our security, our stability, as well as prosperity, which any nation needs and deserves. But unfortunately, our eastern neighbor has always attempted to pursue a policy of relative security rather than absolute security. It wants security on its terms and at the cost of the security of its neighbors. That is something that Pakistan should internationally highlight in all bilateral and multilateral forums. Number one. Number two, I think it's about time. Pakistan is a 73-year-old nation. It's about time we have the confidence in ourselves, and we should confidently tell the world powers that these are our core interests, and we should also not allow Iran and Saudi Arabia to continue to wage or attempt to wage their proxy war in this. We are their friends, but we will not allow our territory, resources and blood to be used for their interests at the cost of the national security and stability of our country. That is very important. The second thing is the time of alliances is over. We need to have broad-based partnerships with all declining, resurgent or emerging poles in the world, because we need to have partnerships on the basis of bilateral and specific interests. China will not fight for us, but China will help us economically, industrially, in terms of meeting our security needs. But we should not harbor any unrealistic expectations. I think our 73 years history is very rich and somewhat sobering. We have very valuable lessons in it, that we need to have a confident, bold and mature foreign policy with all the countries. And it is not just for the Foreign Office to do it. It is not just a track one which can achieve this or fulfill this. Our diaspora has a very major role. You know very well, in terms of highlighting the Kashmir issue, our diaspora played a very major role. And it's about time that we should not have if you allow me to use the word, a very, apologetic policy towards Washington. We should tell Washington that, if it allows space, opportunity and role to India beyond its borders in this region, it will cost the stability and security of this whole region, as well as the US interests in this region. This is very important. Secondly, the upcoming US election is very important for Pakistan and Afghanistan. We should use our diaspora, our think tanks, our media, our scholars to influence and raise this concern in the bipartisan politics, whether it is Democrats, whether it's Republican. Their campaigns should be influenced by us. We should highlight the issue of Kashmir. We should warn them of what are the dangers to the international security of building up India to the US interests. It is not an esoteric exercise.
Yes.
It is very important, so that our foreign policy will be successful when our national security interests, our regional interests become an inherent ingredient of the US domestic politics, and then they will be forced to listen to what our interests are.
Right, and rightly said that at the moment Pakistan and United States interests, they converge, and India is not getting the point, playing the role of a spoiler, which can be very detrimental to the US elections and US interests in Afghanistan.
Absolutely.
I'll put this one more question while talking about Afghanistan and these countries. General Raza, Pakistan's relations with Afghanistan is very important, of course, with all the neighbors, with Iran as well. Now, Iran is a country we all know defies the American world order. We live somehow, when it comes to Afghanistan, India, Iran, overall generally, this is not an easy neighborhood. But how do you address the security issues and situation with Iran, for that matter? Recently, there was a phone call between Chief of Army Staff and General Bajwa and Iranian Chief Bakri. Both talked about securing the border. There are spoilers when it comes to Pakistan-Iran relations. There is no major conflict with Iran, of course. But how do we address this issue of spoilers with Iran?
Okay, first of all, I think the issue of the general insecurity, and I think it was yesterday that the UN chief talked about a global ceasefire through the UN Security Council, wherein it was said that this kind of a ceasefire is going to benefit at least 23 countries, and I'm sure this includes Afghanistan, it includes Pakistan, India, the Middle East, and every other remaining countries. So I hope this ceasefire is also applicable to the various warring factions in Afghanistan, whether it is among or between, the fighting is among or between them, and also the various, the fighting or the hostilities that are there between the United States and Iran. So once that happens, I think greater stability would come to this region as well. It will have a positive impact on the peace in Afghanistan, and also a positive impact on the traffic of oil in the Gulf, and also on the Pakistan-Iran border. We are aware, that border is a very long border, and proper fencing has not been done, as is the case in the Pakistan-Afghan border. And therefore, I think a very timely call between the army chief and the Iranian chief was there. This has been happening in the past as well. And I think eventually some kind of a mutually agreed border fencing mechanism, patrolling by each side, on either side, some kind of satellite coverage of this border will be very, very necessary. I'm sure both the governments could contribute towards the expenditure for doing that, because neither Pakistan nor Iran can do it unilaterally. So it has to be a bilateral effort, and it will be in the national interest of both countries to do this kind of an arrangement, and if needed to sign separate bilateral treaties on that.
Right, right. We'll take a break, and after the break, we are going to discuss about Pakistan's relations with China, because we were talking about challenges in the region and opportunities with Afghanistan, India, Iran for that matter, and Central Asia. But with China, Pakistan's relations are stronger than ever. Both countries are working on China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which is the flagship project of BRI, China's ambitions, but also Pakistan's ambitions as well in the region. We are going to discuss about Pakistan's foreign policy with China, and most importantly, Pakistan's national interest. After this break, stay with us. Welcome back. China is a big power in the region. Pakistan and China have embarked on China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Now, this is a mega economic activity which is not going to benefit just Pakistan or China. This is an opportunity for all the countries in the region. In the past, we have seen that China and Pakistan have asked Afghanistan, and we also expect other countries in the region to benefit from this. But at the same time, we know the spoilers who have been undermining China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, its importance, and they have been instigating insecurities in the region. How is China and Pakistan, how both these countries are looking at the region and the opportunities and the challenges that are there for both of them? Muhammad Ali, how do you see the challenges and opportunities for Pakistan and China, keeping in mind that there is a lot of interesting debate around Pakistan-China relations? We have been discussing this on our show as well. But in modern times, in recent times, how do you see the relationship?
I think Pakistan-China relationship is historic and deepening consistently over the last 72 years. And I think it is an anchor of stability in the changing and transforming world order. It's very important. Allow me to briefly revisit the nature and the critical role this bilateral relationship has played in the past two world orders and also the emerging world order. In the bipolar world, during the Cold War, Pakistan was the bridge between Washington and Beijing. Pakistan was the first country to start an airline. Pakistan was the first country which provided West a window to the Chinese market and to the Chinese leadership. Henry Kissinger, you know very well, visit Pakistan, and then through Pakistan's facilitation, the relationship improved between Beijing and Washington. And that was very critical in the global geopolitical order. Why? Because that allowed US to lure China away from the Soviet Union, and that isolated Soviet Union at the global level as a superpower, as the only communist superpower on its own. And then after the collapse of the Soviet Union, you see a unipolar moment. In that unipolar moment, we saw again Pakistan rising to the challenge of countering the global threat of terrorism as the frontline state, and suffered the most, paid the most price, but still, thankfully, with the robust nature of our nation and the great sacrifices of our military officers and soldiers, we won that war. And now, as we are entering the third era, in which the world is moving towards a multipolar world order, we see again Pakistan's role becoming very important as a balancer, in which it should be a bridge of peace, prosperity and stability between not only Beijing and Washington, but also because the BRI is not meant to invade, harm, occupy other countries. It's not a new colonial world order. It is incentivizing the world to those developing countries which, allow me to say boldly, that have been exploited by the Western imperialism for hundreds of years. They see the rise of China and BRI project as a welcome belated ray of hope to improve their economy, to give hope to their nation, and to benefit from a beneficial, peaceful relationship in this emerging trend. That is very important. And I think the litmus test has been the corona endemic, because you see that unlike the US, which has failed to provide the global leadership which was expected of Washington by its allies and the world alike, that it will lead a global initiative to provide help to the world in terms of not just economic relief, but medical supplies and technological solution. It has failed to do that. It is only China which has helped almost 100 countries through medical supplies, PPEs and other things. So there is a ray of hope in which both countries should learn that instead of confronting, they should compete, which is natural between different states, but they should collaborate where there is a room for improvement and bilateral benefits. And that is something which Pakistan can encourage both Beijing and Washington to do, to manage this very critical global relationship,
right,
and prevent it from becoming a catastrophe for the whole world.
Right. This is a very interesting point, General Raza. Pakistan's role as a bridge builder in the region, when it comes to, let's say, China and United States, the Henry Kissinger episode is very widely quoted in the region, in Pakistan for that matter, and Pakistan's role, by the way, in the Middle East for that matter, as a bridge builder between Iran and Saudi Arabia. We recently saw a few weeks back when there was this tension between Iran and Saudi Arabia and United States in the Persian Gulf. How do you see Pakistan's role as a bridge builder?
I mean, this is a difficult question under the present environment. But one has to see, where this activity could be done. And I would say that it could be done. One area is in Afghanistan, where the national security interests of both the United States, Pakistan and China, they coincide. China is already playing a very positive role in the Afghan peace process. This has been recognized by the United States, by Russia, and everyone else. It is assisting this process in the political, economic, and diplomatic domains, and that is an area which can actually become a very strong bridge. The other area is that of the relationship between the United States and Iran. We are aware that China exercises influence on Iran, and I think that is also an area where China can play an important role to do that. Uh, China is also a leader, one of the major leader in the SCO group. And although the United States does not look very favorably towards the ECO, but then that is a fact. The United States could actually be invited to the ECO as an observer, and it could see that the ECO activities are not against any other country. It is for the mutual benefit of the SCO countries, SCO countries. So that is an area which I think can be looked at. Coming back to Pakistan, I think the CPEC by itself, the 62 countries or so which are part of the BRI, I think they are they should be grateful to Pakistan and China that the flagship project, which is the CPEC, they should support it, and they should collectively tell the United States as well as India they should stop opposing it. And if the United States and India want to come part of the CPEC, I think both China and Pakistan, they have welcomed that. Kashmir is the other area because China is now a party in the Kashmir conflict, and the United States has said that there should be stability in the subcontinent, and that stability now is dependent on not only on India and Pakistan but also China. So while Pakistan and China are playing its role through the United Nations Security Council, I think India needs to be asked to honor the various UN Security Council resolution on Kashmir, and also the advice given to it by the United States watchdog on religious freedom, which has very recently placed India as a country of particular concern because of the ill treatments of its own minorities, particularly the Muslims and the people of the occupied Kashmir.
Right. General Razak, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your time. Pleasure having you on the show. Mohammad Ali, thank you for joining us. Pleasure having you on the show. Thank you for your time. We discussed about Pakistan's foreign policy, a roundup of Pakistan's foreign policy. Pakistan has been working for peace and stability in the region, but as I said earlier, the neighborhood is not an easy neighborhood. We see a 19-year-long war in Afghanistan, and a war that the people of Afghanistan have been fighting for rather a few decades now. A deal was struck between the Taliban and the US, but it looks in jeopardy because of the spoilers and the role that they have been playing in Afghanistan. We hope that it settles soon, because Afghanistan and a country at peace with itself would be at peace with its neighbors. While talking about China, Pakistan and China both enjoy cordial relations, strong relations. Both are working on mega economic activity, China-Pakistan economic corridor, and we expect that Pakistan and China would expedite the working on CPEC, and other countries can also benefit from this mega economic activity. With Iran, we don't have any major conflict, Pakistan and Iran, but the spoilers are there, and to address those spoilers is a major concern for Pakistan as well as for Iran, and hopefully that too in the future will be addressed. With China, things are very obvious. Up and until BJP is there, which is backed by RSS and Shiv Sena, by a Hindutva mindset, this is going to continue from the Indian side. Pakistan opened the Kartarpur corridor expecting that it would be reciprocated from the Indian side. It was not, and we see that still India has been showing aggression on the people of Indian occupied Kashmir and also on line of control and working boundary. The world needs to take care of what is happening in Indian occupied Kashmir, because it is not just a concern for the Kashmiris or the Pakistanis. It should be, and it is a concern for anybody who is concerned about human rights violations anywhere in the world. Thank you for watching today's dialogue. See you next time. Khuda Hafiz.